This thing real quick before we get started. Send this to the brother real quick. Uh, Look on my lap real quick. All right, man. Let's get this thing popping real quick. So, uh, is the King James Version Bible? Is it a slave book? Right. So let's look at a couple of things, man. We got a couple of books that we're gonna examine today, right? We're gonna do the King James. This is the 1611. This is the one of the original copies as far as when it was translated. We got the Apocrypha, man. We're gonna look at, right? We got the regular King James Version Bible. We got, you know what I'm saying, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then we also gonna be looking at the Negro version of the Bible, right? Let's see if the KJV or the King James, as we would call it, is it a slave book, man? First book that I want to definitely examine real quick, man, because um, we got a couple of things, you know what I'm saying, with the original 1611 that it's not as popular, and a lot of people actually don't know the history behind the 1611. So there's a couple of things that the 1611 have that this one don't have, right? So if you look at your regular books now, right, your regular King James Version Bibles, there's some books that's missing, right? Um, with that being said, man, let's examine the 1611. So this is the 1611. You know what I'm saying? We'll look at it. Let's see how they compiled it. I think they have it right here. It says the King James Version, the Bible, popularly known as the King James Version, was first printed in 1611. Um, it was put together by 47 members in the committee of the biblical scholars, and then it goes on and on. But that's one of the things that I want to look at. But I'm gonna come back to that hopefully. But what I was really looking at is some of these books. You know what I'm saying? That's missing out of your 1611, right? Many times, man, we on the streets, right? And we bring up, let's say, the Book of Tobit, or we might bring up Second Esdras. We might bring up what's some other books in here, man? We might bring up Baruch. We might bring up Sirach, right? And a lot of people ask, like, what are these books that y'all reading, and why is it that y'all going outside of the Bible? First and foremost, in your 1611 version, you have books that's been taken out, right? And we're gonna do a little bit of reading in the 1611, and they actually told you why they had took some of the books out. So again, this is your 1611. This 1611 has this inside of it, right? And they took those books out. And the 1611, what's so cold about it is they actually give you a little bit of history of why they took those books out, right? Which is very critical. But before I get into that real quick, I just want to show you some of the books that's in here, right? You got Second Esdras, you know what I'm saying? That's up in here. You have again, you got Sirach that's in here. Let me just go through some of them real quick. Like this, you know what I'm saying? You got Sirach, or known as Ecclesiastes or Ecclesiasticus, right? So you got the Book of Tobit. Now, the reason why this is so important, and we're gonna dive into the history in there, because a lot of people say that we go outside of the Bible when it comes to us reading like Second Esdras or Tobit, or like I said, Sirach. Well, the thing about it is you got the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? And the Dead Sea Scrolls actually have these books, you know what I'm saying, that was found in the Qumran cave, right? So you got the Book of Tobit, you got Isaiah, you have all of these books, right? That was in your original in the 1611 that they took out, but they dug up these same exact books in 1947 in the cave. So it gave these books, you know what I'm saying, like we can't say that these books is flawed or it's not a part of it when we can obviously look, and like I said, man, we can see them in the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? But let's get some small history before we dive into the actual title, you know what I'm saying, of, you know what I'm saying, this discussion real quick. I'm gonna have a reader. Y'all let me know, throw some ones up in there if possible. Let me know if y'all can hear. With that being said, man, let's go ahead and rock out with this real quick.
The Apocrypha and the King James Version. Modern readers of the King James or Authorized Version may be surprised to learn that for the first 200 years of its publication, most editions of this well known translation included the books of the Apocrypha.
You said for how many years?
200 years.
So for 200 years, this apocrypha was inside of your Bible, and then it was taken out, right? And further down, we're gonna read why these books was taken out and who took these books out, right? Let's keep on going on that.
These 14, sometimes numbered as 15 books and portions of books, have a long history in the church and were a point of contention between the Roman Catholic Church and the Reformers.
You see that? So now you got the Roman Catholics and the Conformists, right? And they started to have disagreements on what books was gonna stay and what books was gonna go, right? So we start to see where this all started at. Go ahead.
This introductory essay surveys the origin of these books, the history of their inclusion in Greek and Latin manuscripts, and their inclusion in early English translations.
Right. Let's drop down real quick into something. Let's get the next page, right? And let's go into a little bit of history about it. Let's start right here.
The books of Jewish history that hath been written since Artaxerxes certainly refers to at least some of the books that are found in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. This translation, commonly called the Septuagint, was the Bible of Greek-speaking Jews in Egypt in 2 centuries before Christ, and later became the Bible of the Jews of the diaspora.
Right. So this was the Greek speaking Jews Bible, and that's a dagger. And let me tell you why that's a dagger. That's for anybody that goes to neither Jew nor Greek, and then you try to hit us with a what is that? Galatians 3, right? But the Septuagint, again, that was for the Greek speaking Jews, right? Let's keep going.
And of the early Christians. Scholars debate whether Greek speaking Jews considered these books outside the Hebrew canon to be canonical in their communities, but they are not treated with the same authority as the books of Hebrew canon and later in contemporary Judaism.
Right, keep going.
By the 4th century AD, Latin was replacing Greek as the language of the churches of the West, especially the church in Rome. When the Roman Church wanted a standard Latin Bible, Pope Damasus commissioned the great scholar Jerome to do that translation. Because of his high regard for the Hebrew Old Testament, Jerome at first refused to translate books outside the Hebrew canon. However, translations of these extra canonical books did eventually make their way into the New Latin translations, now known as the Vulgate or Common Bible.
Let's go drop down to something real quick. Let's get that where it talks about them. As a matter of fact, let's get this page real quick. Right. So we're gonna go into why they started to take out, you know what I'm saying, the Apocrypha. And a lot of people might wonder, like, what does this have to do with anything as far as is this Bible a slave Bible? Well, first and foremost, we have to go through the history and see why is it that you're reading a different version of the original. When I say original, what I'm saying is the King James Version being translated in 1611, right? We're not talking about the manuscripts, right? We're talking about just the 1611 being commissioned by King James, right? Let's go ahead and keep going.
The earliest known translations of the whole Bible into English are associated with John Wycliffe or Wycliffe as his followers. These are usually dated between 1380 and 1388 because the Wycliffite.
And you know what? This is the crazy thing. A lot of people think that the King James, and this is the flaw within that, and this goes right into the title. A lot of people think that King James wrote the Bible. No, King James did not write the Bible. King James just gave permission for it to be translated. But there were earlier Bibles. Read that one part back one more time.
These uh, The earliest known translations of the whole Bible into English are associated with John Wycliffe and his followers. These are usually dated between 1380 and 1388.
Right. So that's 300 years before the King James version was even thought of, right? So this should let you know, right, that there was earlier Bibles and manuscripts that was it predates King James, right? So let's knock out this whole notion that King James wrote the Bible, he was gay, um, it was a book that enslaved us, X, Y, and Z, right? Because again, we have earlier copies, right, from 300 years prior to King James even touching this Bible before he was even thought of. Right, let's keep going.
Because the Wycliffite Bible was translated from the Latin Vulgate, it includes the books of both Testaments and the Appendix. So from the beginning, the English Bible was translated with the Apocrypha.
Right, you see that? So you start to see now we got a Bible that was 300 years before the King James 1611 Bible, right? That had the Old and New Testament and included the Apocrypha in it as well, right? Let's keep going.
When Martin Luther translated the Bible into German in 1534, he put the books outside the Hebrew canon into a separate section, agreeing with Jerome that they were not part of the Old Testament. This became the standard for most English translations of the Bible.
Right. So you got a man named Martin Luther that decided that he was going to take out the Apocrypha and then he separated it. And then now you have your standard version of the Bible, even though, right, you had the Apocrypha, right, that was in there for over 200 years. And then they decided to take it out. And again, that man's name was Martin Luther. And let's keep on going there. And where am I reading this from? I'm reading this out of the actual 1611. So all of the history that I'm reading is coming from your 1611, right? Uh that's one thing I do love about it. Go ahead, keep reading.
The first complete Bible printed in English was translated and edited by Miles Coverdale and published in 1535. It contained William Tyndale's pioneering translation work on the New Testament and Pentateuch, and Coverdale's translation of the rest of the Old Testament and Apocrypha from the Latin Vulgate and Luther's German Bible.
Let's drop down. This will be the last page we probably get on this. Let's get some of this. We might want to do the whole page on this one. Or you could do some of the red.
In 1546, at the Council of Trent, the Roman Catholic Church declared the books listed on page 4 to be deuterocanonical, meaning these books were of equal authority to the other books of the Old Testament that were recognized as canonical earlier.
Right. So this is the problem, right? So you got your 1611, right? And what year was that? That was in 1546. So anybody that tell you that the Apocrypha is not it's not canon, well, according to the Council of Trent, they did make it a part of the Bible. But again, you had Martin Luther prior to the time that started to take out the books of the Apocrypha, even though it was in there for 200 years prior to it. Now, it's always been a part of it, but for 200 years prior to Martin Luther, then they started to take out the Apocrypha. So yes, you do have the complete version of your 1611 had your Apocrypha in it. This history is so important because let's say for the 12 tribes of Israel, well, they actually tell you in the 12 tribes of Israel where some of them they went into a no man's land and then they started to go into a place where no man dwelt. So it gives you a second half of where these individuals went, which we would call, you know what I'm saying, America today. You know what I'm saying? Even I got a book, it's called Lost Tribes and Promised Land. They said that this place that they went to is called Azareth, right? Or like a new land. And Christopher Columbus actually, which is funny, and we can go into my Lost Tribes and Promised Land, he actually would read the Apocrypha, and that's how he found America in the first place. A lot of people don't know that history, right? But let's keep going on this.
In 1563, the Church of England's 39 Articles of Religion listed the canonical books of the Old Testament and distinguished them from the other books, the Apocrypha, which the church could read for example of life and instruction of manners, but yet doth it not apply them to establish any doctrine. Thus, the differences between the Roman Catholic and Protestant Old Testaments were firmly established in writing.
Right, let's drop down right here, and then we're gonna kill the rest of that.
Because of the 39 articles, there was no reason for the version of 1611 to include any comments as to the status of these books, as had the earlier English Bibles. In the year before the Authorized or King James version was published, the first English Bible translated by Roman Catholics was completed. Translated from the Latin, the New Testament had been published at Rheims in 1582, and the Old Testament in Douai or Douay in 1610. Following the Vulgate, the Old Testament included the books that had been declared deuterocanonical by the Council of Trent. These continue to be included with some variations in order in all modern Catholic translations.
Right, so we start to see, right, where they started to take out a lot of these, a lot of the 1611. You start to see, right, this book was included inside of it, right, for 200 years. And again, this was in the manuscripts as well, going back all the way to the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? It's important to understand that because we have this notion again that King James wrote the Bible. King James never wrote anything. King James only gave the permission for it to be translated. But there were other Bibles 300 years prior to that, as we just read, right? And also we have the Dead Sea Scrolls again. This Dead Sea Scrolls, and I just want to read this top part. It says more than 1,000 years older than the previously discovered biblical manuscripts with material never before published or translated, including hundreds of new and different readings and lost psalms. Right, this is very important to understand. This right here is 1,000 years older than this and this. Right, King James never wrote anything. Right, so we got these as manuscripts. Right, and we do comparative translation. Right, or we can even go into like the manuscripts and we can start to see like the Dead Sea Scrolls. We can start seeing the Septuagint. We can start seeing Divina Latina. We can start to go into the what other there's so many different manuscripts that we can go into. But the thing about it is we can actually go and we can start to see where some things was added, what things was taken away from, right? So it's important to understand the history of the Bible and what was in place and what was taken out before we just say it was a slave book. But I gotta hit you with this. There was an actual slave book for sure, right? We got it right here. This was a slave book that they wrote for Negroes, right? So a lot of times when I'm talking to my brothers and sisters and we on the streets, they say, I don't want to read the Bible because it's a slave version Bible, which again, they do have a slave version Bible. Yes, absolutely. So let's dive into this slave version Bible and let's see, you know what I'm saying, the things that was added in. And then let's see when you know, things was taken out. I'm gonna start on the first page, and you can skip as you will.
The slave Bible.
Hey, do me a favor, throw some ones up, man. If y'all can hear her, if not, you know, let me know so we ain't just making this live and we can't be heard. Go ahead.
The slave Bible was published in 1807. It was commissioned on behalf of the society.
Real quick, hold your finger on that. So the thing about that is, if you got 1611, you said when was this published?
1807.
18. So you looking at 1807. You looking at 200 odd years of before this slave version Bible was even out. The 1611 already been published, right? So and then before that, you got books that was published 300 years prior to that. And before that, you got manuscripts such as the Dead Sea Scrolls that was 1,000 years before that. And we can start to see and compare what was added, what was taken out. You know, so we're not just reading a Bible and just saying, oh, okay, well, this is just all in all what we just reading as far as like again, like I said, we just doing a comparison so we can see what was added and taken out. And I think that's important because then you can start to see like what's real and what's not, right? But let's keep going.
The Slave Bible was published in 1807. It was commissioned on behalf of the Society for the Conversion of Negro Slaves in England. The Bible was to be used by missionaries and slave owners to teach slaves about the Christian faith and to evangelize slaves. The Bible was used to teach some slaves to read, but the goal first and foremost was to tend to the spiritual needs of the slaves in the way the missionaries and slave owners saw fit.
Right, go ahead. Uh-huh. Write that down.
The names of the editors are never mentioned, although their intentions were clear to limit and control the biblical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The missionaries had to minister to the slaves while attempting to appease the slave owners in the British West Indies.
So this is where you get movies like Nat Turner, right? And so you have this version of the Bible, and we finna dive into this thing too. You got this version of the Bible that they were reading to the slaves, right? And they would take passages out, and we gonna get into that right now. But they would take certain passages out so that the slaves wouldn't build hope for themselves, right? So that's important to understand and know. Keep going on that.
The missionaries had to minister to the slaves while attempting to appease the slave owners in the British West Indies. The owners feared an uprising. Their usual paranoia was heightened because Haitian slaves had overcome their masters 3 years earlier in the only slave revolt in history, in which slaves successfully overthrew their European oppressors and formed a new nation.
Mm.
Slaves and free people of color, led by a former slave and the first black general of the French army, Toussaint Louverture, along with the man who would become his successor, Jean Jacques Dessalines, defeated Napoleon Bonaparte's forces, overcoming their masters.
You see that, right? So they was fearing the uprising, so they had to come out with this slave version Bible in order to now start to control the people, right? Let's keep going. Give me we'll start right here.
The Holy Bible is a library of sacred books containing stories of trials and tribulations, courage and hope, battles and victory. The books tell stories of slavery, struggle, redemption, and freedom. Whether we are enslaved by our own sin or the cruelty of our fellow man, and whether we are set free by the grace of God or through the bloody ravages of war. The Bible tells the story of our downfall, our enslavement, our battles, our escapes, our victories, and the glorious grace of freedom. Throughout history, the Bible has encouraged us to fight against our enslavement to sin, hell, death, and the grave. But it has also encouraged us to fight against our own fellow man who might choose to take our freedom and use us for his own purpose.
Mm-hmm. Keep going. Yeah.
Just as Egypt enslaved the Jews and used them for labor to build their empire, so were the slaves of Africa used to build the empire of the British West Indies and the United States.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Just as Moses stood against the Egyptians and led the children of Israel out of slavery and bondage, so are we encouraged to stand up against the cruel bonds of slavery and fight for our freedom and the freedom of fellow men.
Go ahead, keep going.
The clarion call for human freedom is found in many forms and in various stories throughout the Bible.
Yeah, we can cut it right there. Let's get to where they started to add and take out certain things. Again, this is the slave version Bible. We just gave a little bit of history on the 1611, your regular King James version, and then the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. Go ahead.
In their attempt to eliminate all verses that could plant the seed of rebellion in the minds of slaves, About 90% of the Old Testament and 50% of the New Testament was deleted.
Read that back one more time.
In their attempt to eliminate all verses that could plant the seed of rebellion in the minds of slaves, about 90% of the Old Testament and 50% of the New Testament was deleted.
So it says that 90% of the Old Testament, let me see,
Mhm.
90% of the Old Testament in the slave version Bible was deleted, or they wouldn't let the slaves read. And what was that? 50% of the New Testament, right, was deleted as well. Let's keep reading on that.
In the Standard Protestant Bible, there are 1,189 chapters, but the Bible given to the slaves contains only 232 chapters.
That's crazy. Read that back one more time.
In the Standard Protestant Bible, there are 1,189 chapters.
1,000. So basically 1,189, right? Chapters. And the slave version, they only have 232. Let's do the math on that real quick. That's insane. Let me see that real quick. Where's my phone at? Let's do some just quick math real quick. So what's that? 1189 minus what?
232.
232. That's 957. 957 chapters was deleted from the slave version Bible that they had to read. Mind you, in slavery too, that they couldn't already read. Mind you, in slavery, they already had certain comprehension problems because we couldn't speak in that language or we was killed, right? Or, you know what I'm saying? If we did learn that language, you know what I'm saying, and they found out, they'd cut your tongue out, or you know, or worse, right? So we've always had this issue with learning this language in the first place, right? Let alone now starting to comprehend and learn the Bible that's been translated in their language, right? Let's keep going.
Absent from the Bible were all of the Psalms, which express hopes for God's delivery from oppression, and the entire book of Revelation.
Mm. You see that? Keep going.
In the slave Bible, the book of Exodus excludes the story of the rescue of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, which is the story that gives the biblical book its title. But the Bible includes Exodus chapter 19 and 20, where God appeared on Mount Sinai and gives his law, the Ten Commandments.
Keep going.
The slave Bible left intact Joseph's enslavement in Egypt. It provided an example of someone who could accept his lot in life and work to the best of his abilities within those circumstances and was rewarded for his efforts.
See that? So they kept Joseph in there to encourage the slaves, to allow them to feel like, see, being a good slave is the good thing to do, right? So they kept Joseph in there, but then they took out all of the stories of Moses, right? So, you know, with that being said, you know, man, we gotta learn how to distinguish, you know what I'm saying, the differences between our Bibles. I'm gonna definitely end it here. You know what I'm saying? If y'all don't have any questions, or if you know what I'm saying, if ain't nobody in the chat. Hey, shouts out to Brother Taz, man. I definitely appreciate you rocking with me for sure, bro. You know, it's always a pleasure, man. FOG in the building. And I'm gonna definitely just say this. I ain't with no camp. I'm not affiliated with a camp, but I will say this. If y'all ever want to join the camp, go to FOG. First and foremost, that's Fire God, the brother Ash over there, the Captain Azariah. You know what I'm saying? You got the brothers like Taz and them that's over there. Make sure, you know, y'all get in tune with them brothers for sure. If I was ever going to be in a camp or go to a camp, it would definitely be Fire God, FOG. So make sure that y'all go and check them brothers out. Make sure that y'all go and support their page. And on top of that, my brother Ash, you know what I'm saying? He got music. You know what I'm saying? His wife, you know what I'm saying? She do the tassels. You know what I'm saying? They got merch on there too. So big up to them brothers, you know what I'm saying? That FOG, man. And I just want to let y'all know, man. Go support my brothers over there, man, for sure, for sure. But I don't see nobody else up in the live chat. So, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, hopefully this was some good information for y'all. Hopefully, you know what I'm saying, y'all can process and download this. And you know what I'm saying? With that being said, man, shalom.